My name is Jason Voiovich. I'm an innovation timing expert, and in this video, I'm going to show you the top 10 innovation timing myths that are holding you back from success. Let's get into it right now. Myth number one, first mover advantage. First movers almost never have the advantage. It's one of those things that sounds great, but it's just simply not true. First movers bear the brunt of educating customers, building supply chains, and actually proving there is product market fit. Education is really expensive, and most first new products actually don't succeed. The historical examples are everywhere. Da Vinci built flying machines, or at least designed flying machines in the 1500s. Charles Babbage figured out the first programmable computer in the 1800s. But more modern examples, remember Friendster, remember MySpace? Facebook basically ate them. Remember Netscape? Netscape was the browser in the late 1990s until Internet Explorer basically wiped them out. And frankly, Apple is never first to the market with anything, and they've pretty much done okay for themselves. At best, first mover advantage is fleeting. It buys you a ticket to the game, but you still have to play the game. So the better strategy here is fast follower. Look at where the market is going and be ready to learn from their mistakes, take advantage of all the education they did, figure out what they did wrong, do it better. This has not just happened with Anthropic and OpenAI very recently, where Anthropic was essentially second to market and has blown past OpenAI, but it has happened all throughout my career. Even really simple examples like ADC telecommunications way back in the day, if you know, you know, they were often second to the market with fiber optic patch panels and other technology. It works for pretty much every product or service. Look at who's out there first and be the second to market with something better. Myth number two, a great idea makes its own timing. Essentially, this myth says that if your idea is so good, the market will beat a path to your door. This is the if you build it, they will come fallacy. Most of us know that's not true, but it's a little bit more nuanced than that. Trucking executive Malcolm McLean in the 1950s figured out that if you packed things on shipping containers in standardized crate sizes, essentially a couple of different sizes versus basically any box that things would fit in, loading and unloading ships would be easier. You could put those on trains very easily, and containerized trucking, that entire value chain would work. It's such an obvious idea now that we take it for granted, but how long did it take from 1956, when it was first introduced, to when it basically became the standard? It really wasn't until the 1980s when global shipping changed over, and it was mostly due to the catalyst of the Vietnam War that made things ship back and forth to Asia in standardized crates. So never underestimate how long it's going to take for your idea to work through the process of all of the entrenched behaviors. Plan for more time than you think you're going to need. It always takes longer to change behavior than people think. Myth number three, faster is better. See, the problem is faster usually is better. It's one of those myths that is almost true. The trouble is we like to say faster, and when we say faster, we mean faster at everything. And what we're doing is we're confusing chronological time with perceptual time. Think about that for a second. If you're playing with a puppy, faster is not better. If you're cleaning up their poo, faster is better. So again, you need to be thinking about what experience you're trying to speed up. Don't speed up a good experience. In some cases, you want to purposely slow down and stretch out the experience. My favorite story is in Rome, 1986. Carlo Petrini saw a McDonald's going in across the street in Rome, and he thought to himself, well, there's no way I'm going to compete with McDonald's in terms of speed. He is going to compete with a restaurant across the street that is the slowest possible experience. Everything was slow, everything was savored, and it succeeded right alongside McDonald's. So when you're thinking about competition, don't just think faster is better. Myth number 4, customers will wait for better features. There's a big difference between nice to have and need to have features. And innovators these days have gotten a lot better at things called minimum viable products to help kind of tease apart that difference. But often we don't think about the timing implications of adding just one more feature. My favorite story here is in 1981. You ever heard of a company called the Osborne Computer Corporation? Probably not, and there's a reason for it. They launched the first mass market portable computer, and they had all kinds of features in it. It was really supposed to be the business person's laptop of the early 1980s. The problem was it weighed 24 pounds and had a 5-inch display about yay big. So think about that. Think about lugging that thing onto a carry-on on your airplane, putting it on the seat back tray. There's no way it can survive that. So it's basically anything but portable. The companies that survived and actually succeeded had fewer features, but they were lighter and they had bigger screens. When you think about your invention or innovation, keep in mind the list of features you absolutely have to have for minimum viability, or minimum lovability is the new thing these days, that make sure that people really fall in love and want to use that product. You can always add little features later as the market tells you that they need them. Don't waste time, or don't invest more time putting features into a product that you are not absolutely certain that the customer must have in order to buy. Myth number 5, Agile beats waterfall. Agile has a lot going for it. Instead of trying to figure out all of the features you need up front, you essentially iterate as you go. And you focus on working software, or in the case of hardware, working hardware at each stage of the process. Over the past 20 years, it seems like everybody is on Agile now. The issue is it's not always the best approach. When you have complex products, complex projects, things that require a lot of moving parts, I'm thinking medical devices, I'm thinking construction projects, infrastructure, trucking, major things that require a value chain of innovations to fit together. Doing agile development often doesn't work because it is the entire system that needs to be put together in order to work. Now, you could say I can figure out a way to do agile along the entire value chain, but if there's sequential dependency that is basically a hard gate, if you don't meet that regulatory hurdle with the minimum features, you don't get to pass it, Agile is not exactly the best option for you. When you're thinking about your development methodology, don't think about it in terms of what's trendy. Think about it in terms of what's the right answer for you. Myth number 6, when markets fall, hoard cash. In finance, there's an old saying, cash is king. And it certainly works for finance, but story after story, evidence after evidence, year after year, we learn in innovation that when markets fall, it is the right time to innovate. It's the right time to launch a new product when things crash. Why is that? Perceptions have shifted. Whenever things crash, and they meaningfully crash, not just kind of a little dip in the stock market, I mean a crash, people rethink all kinds of things. They are forced to. Either they ran out of cash, they lost their job, the stock market dropped 80%, whatever the case is, people rethink their behaviors when there's a crisis. There's an old saying, never waste a good crisis. As an innovator, you need to take that to heart. Think about the pandemic back in 2019, 2020, and think about where Zoom was at that time. Zoom was kind of janky in 2017, 2018. It worked, not a whole lot of people used it, but the pandemic happened and boom, we had to reevaluate all our behaviors. How were we still going to run our businesses when we couldn't be in person? Zoom was the perfect answer for that and improved quickly during that time. So when you think about market crises or things that are happening in your market, it's not to say that anyone wants something to happen bad, but when it does, you need to be ready to jump. So when everyone else is hoarding, you need to launch. Myth number 7, go big or go home. This is a launch myth, and launches of new products and services are risky for all kinds of reasons. Is the technology going to work? Will customers buy it? How will competitors respond? But they're also really risky for an underappreciated reason, and it's our perception of launch day. So much work has gone into that moment. It's such a big deal that what you want to do is you want to go big. You're thinking that everyone in the world needs to hear about this, and if I miss this opportunity, I'll never get it back. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Remember that commercial? The problem is, it's not really true. My favorite example is the Nintendo Entertainment System in the mid-1980s. I remember it as a kid. I saved up my money to go buy one, and I bought the gold cartridge Legend of Zelda game. Remember that? Am I just old? I'm getting older. But you might remember that. And if you remember that, you think, wow, that was just the hugest launch ever. And if you were a kid, you were a Gen Xer, you were a kid in the mid-1980s, that was the thing to have. Here's what people sort of forget. In the first year, it was only released in New York, and it was sort of hand-delivered by Nintendo executives. They knew that video games were crashing at that time. There were all kinds of these systems, incompatible hardware, incompatible software, and retailers didn't really want more systems on the shelf. They looked at Nintendo. Nintendo had some characters, it had some things, but to stock another expensive brick on the shelf that wouldn't sell was not very appealing. So what Nintendo did, they hand delivered them only to a select market, and crucially, they said if they don't sell, we'll take them back. That gave retailers the confidence to push the Nintendo system over others that were sitting in inventory. The rest is history. You don't need to go big to have success. Launch is not a day. Launch is a series of events over a longer period of time than you may think. Myth number 8, all time is created equal. Now, it's natural to kind of agonize over every step of the process that the customer sees. We do journey maps where there are moments of truth along the journey map. The most famous example is McDonald's. When you drove up, could you see the sign? That was a moment of truth. You got into the parking lot. Could you find a parking space? Moment of truth. You walked in the door was clean, the restaurant was clean. Moment of truth. You get the idea. The problem is that as an individual innovator or inventor, how are you going to master any and every one of those details? And we're trying to optimize for this entire journey when they are not all created equal in the mind of the customer. What's critical is when we try to optimize for every moment, we optimize for none of the moments. And here's what we can really learn about that. And it was Kahneman and Tversky's peak end rule. And what Kahneman figured out is that in our experience of a total number of sequences, we remember the peak experience, kind of the highest intensity, and we remember what happens at the end. And the rest of it tends to not be stored in our memories. Our memories, our computers are kind of sloppy machines. They're designed by evolution, not by software. So we tend to remember and get stored in memory only a couple of the experiences of the entire sequence. So when you're thinking about this, don't think about all those moments of truth as equal. Pick the one that is the peak experience, maximize that one, and then at the end, when people put away your tool or they finish the software, think about that as the end, and you're going to do better than trying to optimize everything. Myth number 9, you can accelerate adoption with advertising. This is one of the most repeated pieces of advice in all marketing. If you want people to buy your product, they have to know about it. And to get them to know about it, you need to advertise. Now, for established products, that is absolutely true. If you want to increase market share, you must be advertising. There is very little alternative once you get to a mature competitive market. But for new products, it's not quite that simple. My favorite story here are the founders of Hotmail. They just didn't have the capital to be able to spend on major advertising campaigns. So they did something a little bit different. In everyone who had a Hotmail address, and you maybe remember this if you had one, that at the bottom of the email was something you couldn't turn off that said, hey, if you want your own free Hotmail address, click here and you can get your own. And essentially, every email that went out became an advertisement for the next person to get their email. And this is the time when people might have had a company email address, but sort of wanted a personal email address, and no one really had one. It was perfect. Basically, in 18 months, they grew from nobody to 12 million. So again, advertising can be a catalyst for you, but it's not the formula. You need to be thinking about different ways to hack the sequence. Finally, myth number 10, you can out-engineer the clock. Once we get to the disruption phase of the product lifecycle, when something is an established product and it is in the process of being renewed, the standard answer is that you're being disrupted technologically. The answer must be add more technology. So if your competitor's car has 300 horsepower, you'll do 400. If the competitor's hair care line has 5 fragrances, you'll have 7. Your smartphone has 6 megapixels, yours will have 10 megapixels. The problem is they rarely succeed because the technology isn't what customers want. When you think about a disrupting market, it means the game has changed. The same factors that got you up that performance curve do not satisfy you really well when the performance curve has shifted to something else. The best story I like on this one is when the Japanese flooded the market in the 1970s with cheap, precise digital watches. Before then, if you wanted a good watch, you needed a Swiss watch. Those are the best ones, obviously, and some of the brands are still around. But in the 1970s, 1980s, I remember as a kid, I would get those little Casio watches. There is even like a little calculator watch. Did you have a calculator watch? Is this kind of Gen X o'clock here? I had a little calculator watch. The buttons were really tiny, by the way. But it was a lot of fun, and the thing was like $9. The Swiss realized they simply could not compete with the Japanese in terms of electromechanicals. There's just no way. Some of them tried to make their watches a little bit more precise mechanically. It didn't work, and they shifted pretty quickly. And they went in one of two directions, shifting the performance curve away from electronics and precision. In one case, they went to the jewelry route. That's the Rolex and the watches I don't buy. This is a Apple Watch. There's that entire kind of legacy Swiss brands that were all about the fancy watch, and it was a status symbol. So they went kind of the status symbol route. The other way is what Swatch did. What Swatch did is they said, you know what? We're going to do the digital watches. That's cool, but we're going to make them fashion accessories. So we're going to do collaborations with California Raisins, and we're going to have different colors and we'll have different styles. And essentially, you would have a watch for basically every one of your outfits. Remember, in the 1980s, everyone had to have a Swatch. That was a thing. Well, I didn't. I had a calculator watch, which probably tells you a lot more than you ever needed or wanted to know about me. Probably explains a lot. But cool kids had Swatches. I had a calculator watch. You get the idea. You can't compete on the same plane when the market shifts on you. So remember that with your product, your service, if you are thinking about a market that's being disrupted right now, don't play the same game. You will lose. If you stuck with me this long, you're going to get 2 bonus myths that will help you get your product or service to the next level. So if you're with me right now, let's get to myth number 11. Myth number 11, faster sequences are better sequences. If your process to use your product or service consists of 7 steps, each one takes 5 minutes, if you take 1 minute per step off, you're going to reduce the overall time by about 20%, right? Wrong. This is another example of our obsession with speed over performance. It's a failure to understand that chronological time and sequential time are unique things. My favorite story here is the story of manufacturing, again, in the 1980s. I'm a kid of the 1980s, so a lot of my stories are 1980s stories. Western manufacturers really thought a lot about kind of sequential time and speeding up the entire process. There was no real thought to, if I sped up step one, but step three was still really slow, step three became a bottleneck, and there was lots of inventory, there was lots of rework, there was a real stress in the system. But the people who were managing step one and step two, they were doing great. It was the people who are focused on step three that got crushed. The problem is, it didn't really work that well, and it led to higher prices, it led to more rework, it led to lower quality. The Japanese Taiichi Ohno realized, you know what, I can't compete with the Americans and the Europeans on this process. I'm going to think about something different, and invented the Kanban process. Instead of maximizing performance at each individual stage, his idea maximized performance at the intersections between those stages. So instead of trying to say, well, how many can I get done in step one and just push them all to step two, and that's step two's problem, he thought about, instead of step one and step two, it was the intersection between step one and step two that was optimized. That led to not only faster overall throughput, even though some steps were slower, the entire sequence moved smoother. It led to higher quality, lower rework, and a faster response time when things changed or when you noticed a problem. Instead of thinking about each step, think about the transitions between the steps, optimize those. Myth number 12, no one likes to wait. Of course we do. We wait all the time for very good things. It's called anticipation. Think about going on to a roller coaster at the theme park. This is the kind of the classic example. You're climbing the stairs to get up to the top of the roller coaster. And when the roller coaster, you get in the car and it's slowly going up. They could make that go faster, by the way. They could make that process of getting you to the top of the roller coaster, the first hill, go faster. Here's the problem. That's not as fun. What's fun about the process and what kind of gets you excited about it is the waiting in the line, going up, click, 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 click. You're kind of going up the thing and you're waiting. You're like, oh man, I can't see anything. And why do they make you wait at the top? It's so you get that anticipation so that when you go down, it makes the actual payoff that much better. Waiting makes the heart grow fonder. So when you're thinking about your experience with your product, it is okay that they savor the experience. Don't think about this in terms of either no one likes to wait or you're going to make people wait for everything. Be strategic about how you use time to maximize the experience. That's it for this video. What additional myths do you have that are holding you back right now? Put them in the comments and I'll respond to them. Or I might even do another video just on that one. Until then, see you on the next one.